Hey, fellow Tears, those of us like our spirituality with a twist. So, we are in the midst of doing a deeper dive into Christianity and sort of the different subtypes of Christianity that were there from the very beginning. We got into doing this as we've been talking about because we've been doing this. We like to do things in series. So, this is our little Christian history, Christian philosophy series. And we're going to talk today about the Gnostics. So, we're at like one of the key spiritual points in talking about the great Gnostic tradition. We got to the whole idea of doing it because we've been our overarching series, the never-ending story, gets the old movie right, has
Hmm.
been America, what the hell? And part of the problem, I think, if you want to diagnose it would be that there's just sort of toxic versions of Christianity running amok. So, our way of approaching it was like, okay, well, let's talk about Christianity and we'll all have a chance to think about it, its ups and downs and different permutations and variations, and we'll walk away with better understanding. So, Gnostics for today, and we've had little Gnostic talks here and there, but this will be maybe a little deeper conversation about Gnosticism. But before we start, we'll do the same thing that everyone asks you at the start of everything like this, which is to like, subscribe, send an episode to a friend, write a review. You can help out Jin and Tantra in the dreaded algorithm, which is trying to act like a demiurge, Gnostic speak, to crush us all. But anyways, help us out. And it's a labor of love, and we really appreciate everyone who listens and everyone who can give us a shout out. Thanks so much. All right, Daniel, before we get into it, one of the things that has been interesting for me, just to like as a meta conversation, we like to be a little meta about these episodes before we dive in, is that I think you could talk about the things that we're talking about and just give like a 5 minute hot take. But our thing has been more like, okay, the things that are important to talk about, let's really try to unpack them in a more deep way. So I was thinking like over 2025, we started talking about, okay, you could sit around and just do a bunch of episode, like little tiny shots about how MAGA is a cult or something. Or you can go and say, well, let's look at what a cult really is. And because I think we're an educational podcast, we're trying to do that a little bit deeper. And I'm glad we did that stuff. And now we're into this idea of, instead of just giving like a 5 minute thing about the bad sides of like Christian nationalism or something, we can dive a little deeper and explore it a little bit deeper. And I'm glad we're doing that. I don't know if you had anything you wanted to say about that.
Yeah. Um, and I hope it doesn't turn, but it doesn't turn the ship so much. But yeah, I do. And Eric and I lean definitely more socially progressive for sure. I think fiscally, I don't know. I care, but I also like whatever. Let's just be responsible with the general money. That's it. I don't have any other policy details other than that. And the unfortunate part, about I think saying where you end up falling on the spectrum is that you inevitably alienate people who don't either think like you or label you as something else. I would like to think that the things that we are sharing are illuminatory for those who would be on any side of the spectrum. Right. And so, on one hand, if you know all of this, this is a historical review. If you don't know any of this, then this might be enlightening from a, historical perspective. But it's not just about history. We're talking about the history to show the relevance to today and the influence that it has on the culture. And it's not a matter of like picking something and dunking on it. It's a matter of saying, what are the forces at play, the larger forces at play? Where did they come from? How did they develop? And now, what are they doing to our society currently? How are they involved currently? So we're trying to, as we were, as practitioners, we're trying to come up with a diagnosis. But like any organism, it's complex. It's not merely just one single virus that gives you a cold or a flu, and now you have a headache or whatever. It's a confluence of pathogens and internal chemistries that are all at play. And so when we look at this from a societal perspective, it's what are the economic forces? What are the religious and spiritual forces? What are the, psychological forces? All of these things working together. And so this is kind of our way of doing this. It's just, but we're doing it in a much longer series to give a fuller context as to why it is that we believe that we're here. And in the midst of it, we're trying to give, little ways to remedy as much as we can, in the time that we have allotted for these discussions. So that's what I wanted to say. We are for everybody, really. It's not a matter of do you agree with us or don't agree with us, And if you don't agree with us or you do agree with us, please feel free to leave a comment. Talk shit if you like. It's all good. We get some of those fun comments too, and I'm all good with that, Love is always good, but hate means we're at least being seen, and I'm good with that too sometimes.
Yeah, I like what you're saying there. I mean, I really think it's trying to go and give a very full picture of things, right?
Yeah.
And like I think the things that we're talking about are relevant to the now. I agree with you. We're trying like what's the my one of my Bob Marley quotes I always share with students is like from the classic Bob Marley track Buffalo Soldier. If you know your history, then you know where you're coming from, right?
Hmm.
So these things have roots and beyond just being kind of fascinating as a spiritual story, right? These roots are affecting us now. And I think in a communal level, but then also on an individual level, it's good to understand this stuff, right?
Hmm.
I think more deeply about. All right, awesome. Totally agree. I think well said. All right, so one of the big things about this has been to, I think for me, and I do see this as a little preamble to talking about the Gnostics in more detail. And I think it's a Gnostic thing to do, or I think it's a spiritual thing to do, to break these things apart, understand
Yeah.
how people think. There's a deep tradition in like Buddha Tantra land of going through and saying, what do different kinds of people think? And then when you know how people think better, you're in a better position to understand their perspective, understand where they're coming from,
Yeah. Yeah.
help them if you can, give feedback, talk through things with people because you can understand where they're coming from. Yeah, and there's a certain power in that. And this is a spiritual thing to do. Let's understand what this is about. The other part that I think is a little bit interesting, and again has this Gnostic or you could say Buddhist Tantra vibe, is just to say there is no like real Christianity. And I've been trying to make this point a little bit each episode. Like so much of the argumentation now is like we're the real Christians or we're the real Christians. And there's no real Christians in the sense it's always been super diverse. There's always been a lot of different Christians with a lot of different perspectives. And that is good in the sense that you can't even pigeonhole Christianity like you can't pigeonhole a lot of things. It's broad. It means a
Yeah.
lot of different things potentially to a lot of different people. And I like that because it gets it kind of more ecumenical. We don't even have to be just let's choose those aspects of Christianity we don't like or the versions of Christianity we don't like and we'll just hammer on those. No, it's broad, it's big. It
Yeah.
always meant a lot of different things. And that diversity of what it means actually has translated down to the present day.
Eric, let
I
me
do,
pause you there for 1 second.
yeah,
When you say that, so as I know I have your notes. When you say there are no real Christians, it's almost better to be seen as it's written. There are no real Christians, like emphasis on the real.
yeah,
And I know you said it, but I just want to highlight it for people who are listening. It's not that Eric, you're not saying there are no Christians. It's not that. It's that there is no like not one is not more authentic than the other.
yeah,
It's not like, oh, these ones are the ones and the rest of them are not. That's not what you're saying. That's what you're saying is that like, no, they all have schools that they come from, and each school, like in pretty much every religion, says, oh, we're the best one. No, no, we're the best one. No, no,
yeah.
no, we're the best one. It's like, it's like sports, It's like, oh, the Brewers are the best. No, the Dodgers actually are the best, actually. That's just.
That's just a
But
true fact that you
yeah,
can't
yeah,
get around.
right, right. So
Yeah,
good for you if you're a Dodgers fan, and if you're not, that's just too bad.
yeah, uh-huh.
Anyways, but yes, I wanted to highlight that because the way that it's written is almost more easily understood than the way that it's said.
Yeah, I get what you're saying,
Yeah,
and I think again, I think we were timely in this because I started seeing all this stuff. We were going to talk about this, and
yeah,
it's popping out. So if we were being Jungian, Carl Jung, we'd say we're vibing with the collective unconscious. We're picking up where the waves are going,
mm,
and a lot of it is like, well, we're the real Christians, and these other people aren't, and that can happen on all kinds of sides, right? But when you really look at it, and I know you put on your that part it's come up in different episodes that part that's sort of like the critical spiritual thinker when you really look at things honestly let's look at this clearly And honestly, like, which is a virtue, I think, in like Buddhist Tantra and some of these other things, let's, be honest. Well, there's not one. It ends up being that it's a plurality from the very beginning,
Yeah.
right? Yeah. Okay, so of the things that we've talked about so far, and I'm sure we'll go back and forth in different ways about this. There was one group that was sort of called like the Ebeonites. Quick thing just to remind, we did episodes on this before, but the Gnostics are going to contrast with all these different people. So part of it's figuring out like who are they in contrast with, right?
Mm.
So this is a beautiful tradition too, in the sense that it's a group of people who didn't see Jesus as like the Son of God, but saw him as a prophet. And that tradition continues on to the present day. There are people who think that way, right? Either in the Christian world, or there's a lot of people who think that way who are called Muslims. If you want to get to a lot of people, it's a lot of people who think this, right? But the other part that's beautiful about them, and we were talking about this a few episodes ago, this connects back into the part that's like what you might call the Franciscan kind of vibe in Christianity, simplicity and charity, and giving away your wealth and living in a way connected to life and the earth in a simple way. A lot of times when you look at like things with St. Francis, he's out in nature, right? And he's
Hmm.
connecting to the world in this very immediate way. I don't know, Daniel. I thought when we were talking about that one kind of vibes with you on some level.
Oh
I thought
yeah, well.
personally, I think you feel a connection to that in some way. Was I reading that right?
Yeah, totally. Well, and what there's something else that you said, Eric. There are, I mean, at least from my studies, and you could say what you've heard or what you've seen previously, but from my understanding, people believe that Islam was the next step to Christianity. Like
Like
Christianity was the
the
next step to
follow up or
Judaism.
something. Yeah.
Yeah, that Islam was the next step. Like they're like, okay, here you go. This is the evolution because, in the Muslim tradition, they very much revere Mary and Jesus. Like it's not they're like, yeah, no, those are good. We like
It's
those.
weird if you don't know that, you're kind of shocked, someone who might not be familiar with that part of Islam.
Yeah.
I like Rumi, so I read things from Rumi, and Jesus
Mm-hmm.
appears in those stories all the time. And he's
Mm-hmm.
obviously a
Mm-hmm.
person who's presented with some reverence. Of course, he's not presented as like the figure that Christians would have him, the Son of God and the only path, and so on. But he is
Correct.
a weird person. That line of thought, a great prophet, continues down to the present day, and like however many billion people are Muslim in the world,
Yeah.
like that line goes on. Or in the Christian side of it, and I wanted to bring this one up because I think we were talking about it, and I could just see how it resonated with you, like that idea of like simplicity and connection, charity, you know,
Mm-hmm.
the connection to like nature and the earth, all that stuff really, I think, speaks to you. And again, when we did the episode a bit ago, we watch each other's faces as we talk. I
Right.
was like, oh, this is vibing with Daniel. This is the part that like resonates with you. In a
Yeah.
certain sense, I think your feeling of authenticity, like what's the authentic part, comes from that almost,
Yeah.
that really resonates with you. All right.
Yeah.
So that's one other group of people who are out there. Then there's this group we talked about called the Marcianites. And the weird thing about this is that a lot of people who are Christian are probably like this, even though they wouldn't know that they're like this. But, what Marcion did was he said, okay, there's the God of the Old Testament. That was something that had to do with Judaism. Jesus came bringing a new vision of divinity, a different and new one. And so he actually rejected the Old Testament thing completely. He
Mm-hmm.
said, no, we're going to let that go. That's obviously a tradition that has much more the feeling of like a harsher divinity,
Mm-hmm.
right? That's cool if people want to follow that. That's for you. Do it. We're going to follow a new version, which is going to be more based on like love and forgiveness and acceptance. And we're going to flip the script. And the weird thing
Hippies.
about that, what's that?
Hippies.
Well, it could be, but even like listening to like Bart Ehrman, who's one of the scholars I've been paying attention to,
Yeah. Yeah.
was he was like, a lot of Christians he talked to kind of think that way. They're like, oh, the Old Testament God, that was a kind of an angry God. We're not into that. We
Yeah.
like our New Testament God. And Marcion was just like, yeah, we're going to take this to its conclusion and just say, yeah. But a lot of people might be like unconscious Marcionites. They don't even realize that they are.
Mm.
So it's worthwhile thinking about that. Um, we spent some time talking about the proto-orthodox. And again, this is
Yeah.
an important one because this is probably where the clashes are going to be really majorly. I think if you were to diagnose something, this is the line of thought that can go toxic, right?
And these were like the
It goes too
Benedictines.
far. Yeah, we were making this analogous to the Benedictines when we were talking
Yeah.
about them contrasted with the Franciscans on a previous episode. You had a really good observation that we had a couple of popes before our present Chicago Pope. Go
Chi-Town
Chi-Town.
Pope in the building.
Windy City Pope. But
Yeah.
the
Da
one
Pope.
the Chicago thing. Da Pope. Um where you had one Pope call himself Benedict. Well, okay, you get the vibe of where he's coming from, right?
Yeah, for
Much
sure.
more orthodox, kind of more traditional, a little bit more rigid. And then we had Francis, right? Was he the
Hmm.
first Pope from South America? I think he
I
was.
think so. Yeah.
Yeah. So, anyways, you got a different thing completely, right? And he chose that on purpose. So sometimes you can even see where people are leaning with those kind of linguistic things. One of the things I try to do with proto-orthodox, and we're diagnosticians, so I've been trying to come up with little, anagrams or something like that to capture this stuff. So I put it into what I'm calling the hype model
I
because the
like hippie.
Christianity that appeared kind of showed hype, but they're not hippies.
No, I know. That's why I like it.
The irony of them being not hippies.
The anti-hippies.
Yeah. So I was going to do this like in the context of one of the episodes we did before, because the idea was that they kind of invented a whole bunch of new stuff. And I just had a couple of comments on it. Well, one was the idea of the H in the hype model, where they came up with the concept of really talking about hell like super serious.
Hmm.
And it's weird to go back in time to think people weren't talking that way. But I guess in the traditional world that they were coming out of, no one talked that way, right? You didn't have this idea that you're going to be forever tortured and damned and things like that.
No, we just thought it'd be for a few years.
Yeah, then you get out.
Yeah, then you're like, I'm good.
No, it's wild to think people weren't thinking about that at all. No one was thinking about like an infinity of the soul or something. It wasn't on anybody's mind, apparently. No one had that metaphysical belief, right? You're like, okay, I'm going along, and then, whatever you think, you're going to pass away. But this concept wasn't there. But I had one other thing I wanted to back up on a little bit because I think it overlaps with a couple of these things. And we talked about it briefly, but there's one other thing I wanted to point out about it from a previous episode, which was just about the Jezebel story from the Apocalypse of John, which is like the book of Revelation. And we talked about it kind of brief. I did a double back and I listened to Bart Ehrman's things on this. He's one of the biblical scholars I really respect, just a very straightforward biblical scholar. And there's this bizarre episode that we did talk about where the Son of Man in the book of Revelation, with all of its creepy kind of like 1980s heavy metal Iron Maiden shit going on in that book, creepy ass book. In that thing, there's a very weird part at the beginning where, and this is wild to think about, but where the kind of voice box of Jesus in the book is basically talking about like other Christian churches and essentially how the whoop ass is going to be like opened on them too. And I wanted to bring it up because it really shows that if you go deep into that part, and I think for a lot of the Christianity that goes toxic, this part is really emphasized.
Hmm.
When I listen to people who come from these very like orthodox, evangelical, and kind of aggressive versions of Christianity, the kind of stuff that's like infiltered, has been like filtered through the White House, kind of like this Christianity, which is problematic. Like I just don't see any way around it. I think it's a problem, right? Like has this thing where it's like hostile to other Christianities. So you realize how pervasive that hostility is. But in the story of the book of Revelation, you know, uh, there's another Christian group that's being like singled out of how horrible things are going to happen to them because they're not doing it right. And not doing right in the context of the book means you're not doing it right for John of Patmos, the author of that book.
Hmm.
You're not doing it his way, you're wrong. And it's not just that you're wrong, horrible shit's going to happen to you. So it's wild. The character in the book who's the target of this particular part, and there's like 7 churches that get blasted. And in this one, the figure who's the female leader in this church is named a Jezebel, which is like obviously a derogatory term for like a loose woman, right? And the punishment for her is going to be that the Jesus figure of the Son of Man is going to appear and he's going to toss her onto a bed. And Cameron points out that people try to like dodge this a little bit by changing the translations into English. So he says people try to say hospital bed or sick bed with this, but it's just a bed. And then the men in the who are also being like punished are going to have sex with her. It's not obvious if the sex is consensual. Those men are going to be cursed. And then the babies that are produced from those unions are going to be killed.
Mm.
And we talked about it like so a while ago, and I just wanted to go back a bit because it's just astonishing when you look at this. And if like in these parts of the Christian world that are into this book, you could see how aggressive it gets and how violent it gets. Even I wanted to point out, even against other Christians, it gets really aggressive. And the bizarre thing about this is, why is this terrible thing going to happen? And we didn't talk about it, but I wanted to share just to like to see how these groups can be so aggressive, and you can feel the root of where this comes from. If you were really into this book, what the reason this figure, the Jezebel, is going to be punished, her crime, is that they mentioned sexual immorality, but what Aaron points out is a lot of times that had to do with like doing stuff that was too pagan. So here's what they're arguing about. I'll do the quick version, but I'll get your response, Daniel. But what they're arguing about is there was a debate of whether or not you could eat meat that was offered to in pagan ceremonies. That's the debate. And it's very esoteric, right? So some of the people, and this is something that Paul has to address too, were like, okay, these gods, we're not worried about them. They don't exist. At that time, there wasn't really any other ways of getting meat. The animals were being butchered for sacrifices, right? And then you would just get the meat afterwards. And so some people were like, okay, fine. We don't worship these gods. These gods don't even exist. Who cares? And other people are like, no, that's a bad thing to do because you're participating in pagan worship and you're doing idolatry. Is this an esoteric point? To my mind, yes. Can't get much more esoteric to that. And what Jezebel does is she kind of says it's okay to eat this meat that's being offered in these pagan ceremonies because it just doesn't matter, you know? And because of that infraction in this crazy book, she's going to be like potentially sexually assaulted, have kids, and have them murdered. And I bring it up because it shows you like just the aggressiveness of that part of that tradition. It has that part in it. And when I listen to some of the evangelical people talk, and I'm listening to people who got out of that world, they're trying to describe like you don't understand how aggressive it is and how hostile they are to other people. And if you can trace that back, you can kind of see the roots of that kind of hostility, right? There's a part of that tradition, not the parts that most of us would identify as being Christian, but that part at the back of the book, that some people are latched onto that are really, again, like violent and aggressive, really violent imagery and really aggressive imagery to the point where, obviously, if you go back historically, a lot of people would be like, that book shouldn't even be in the Bible. It's too awful. Just take it out. Anyways, I wanted to share it because it's so
Hmm.
striking, and you sometimes wonder, like, where does this aggressive Christianity even come from?
Hmm.
If you like were really attached to that version, you could see how that goes all the way back. There were people who had like that part too from the very beginning. Anyways, I'll
Well,
throw it back to you, Daniel.
there's a
But
few things. So one, that book sounds a lot like the previous book in terms of the God of retribution,
yeah.
right? And John had been an end of world person already. So this feels very much in line with what his views, or at least what I believe his views to be, which is we're ushering in end times.
Hmm.
And so these are going to be very much fire and brimstone type viewpoints. You were either with us, against us, very dualistic,
Yeah. Right.
literally heaven, hell, these kinds of things. Um, Second, it's just interesting to me, and not just that maybe minimizing it. It's interesting to me that we sell something that we have absolutely no way of verifying, and we sell it with absolute confidence all over the place. You know, whether you're selling punishment or whether you're selling reward, nobody really knows. Nobody really knows. You just make assumptions based on what it is you've heard from somebody else who doesn't really know. And this idea of like sacrificing what it is that you have now for what it is that is potentially going to come, maybe, is just such a wild, like, it's such a wild I don't want to say con job. I don't know. I mean, like you're here now. You're localized now. Your energy is in you right now. When you're not you anymore, you're no longer you. Yes, you still exist in some way, but you're not yourself. This is like a sort of a clarifying moment in my mind at this very second, actually. You know?
Wonder about that kind of stuff too. And like, you can be cynical and you could say, and we've had this part of the conversation too, were people just being opportunistic? Were they being cynical or Machiavellian or something? And you could think of that aspect of things. But then you also get the part like, they're certainly writing like they really believe it, like really, really believe it. It just happens that it's kind of demented.
I mean, I
Worse
don't
than
think
any
it's
Iron Maiden song I ever heard. Like back in 80s metal or something. It's really
Th-
violent.
but it's not. But the teachings haven't evolved. It's literally the same thing. It's the same right now. Same things are being preached. I was sharing with a friend who was going back and forth with somebody, and I gave them a passage from the New Testament to share.
Yeah, yeah.
And I said, you have to communicate with people in a language they understand. And people who keep themselves in one book or another on a regular basis, well, you know their language. So you just find pieces in there that speak to the counters to their point, and you can have a very easy argument. Like it's just very quite simple. So that's a bit of a side. But my third point was that this kind of the Jezebel story reminds me of our current situation, politically with the famous island, and that right that humans can be viewed as different opportunities for pleasure or for pain or for whatever the case is, and that Jezebel story in particular, I think, is probably one of the most clear examples of that, you know, that you can make a mistake or do a thing or something, and then you are absolutely condemned for it, and then your progeny is condemned, which sound like some of the things that have been coming out of those reports. You know, I'm cautious to say the name because they have been pulling down videos, some of which, if you've mentioned some
Yeah, yeah,
shit,
yeah, yeah,
so
yeah, yeah.
so and everybody knows exactly what I'm talking about, unless your head is underneath the rock inside of a sand, in hell, But
Yeah.
other than that, like it's just yeah, I don't know. It seems very it's even though this is an old story and whatever, it seems really, really connected to that current thing as we're all trying to, wrap our head around how, this kind of shit could happen today.
Well, I think like the P in the thing is like patriarchy, and it's certainly not the case that Christianity invented patriarchy, but
Yeah.
it's important for this kind of Christianity to function. It's very like built into that, right? And we try to be very open and kind of acknowledging like there's all kinds of sufferings amongst different groups of people. That's just
Yeah.
being right. So I think in one of the previous episodes we were talking with Phaedra Chantal, who was one of our great guests, and we were talking about okay, there's things that men are going through, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so we were talking about that at that time, but you can't talk about the now when you can't talk about proto-orthodoxness without really recognizing how patriarchal it is. And it's really important to control women. And we've done this in previous episodes. We have to do all of it again, though it's going to come up at different times because it's
Yeah.
just there.
Mm-hmm.
There really is this commodification of women and this attempts to really corral them somehow and
Mm-hmm.
subjugate them. And it's part of this tradition, right? So sad but true, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, real quick, if you look at like this is the kind of things that Gnosticism is going to be framed against this kind of brutal kind of hell thing of the eternal torment, the H, the P with the patriarchy. If I just double back in my little height thing, the
Mm-hmm.
I is kind of like ideology, which I think also goes back to the story, which is why I wanted to share the Jezebel thing, because we're talking about tiny differences
Mm-hmm.
and like ideology, but the response of the person having whatever this text is and whatever motivated them to write this thing are like on these tiny points of ideology, you're fucked.
Mm-hmm.
And like you're gonna get fucking destroyed. God is gonna come down and like rip you apart over these little ideological points. So, anyways, part of this was this emphasis of ideology, which I think we talked about in our episode in the historical world, people were like, what is this? But anyways, we get the ideological part going on in that, right? And indoctrination kind of are the I parts of this, right? The ideology,
Hmm.
indoctrination. So where, other kinds of traditions, and I was thinking about you a lot with this, Stanley, because you like to use the phrase like teachers and teachings. You like to use that phrase, the teachings. And I think when you talk about like the teachings, you're talking about something that has some flexibility to it. You're not talking about something that's like has to be like indoctrinated and ideologically like harsh, right? And rigid.
Hmm.
And, I was just thinking about, what this be like to talk about this stuff. And I always think about, phrases that we say and things that we emphasize. And this is really ideological and like doctrinaire. And, you disagree with me about how you're supposed to handle some aspect of butchery. And like, no, I'm going to write about how you're going to be destroyed
Right.
for this tiny point of difference about like a really esoteric thing, right?
Yeah. But the other
Why?
part, Eric, is
Yeah.
that is the and I wanted to make sure I said it right. Anthropomorphization
Yeah.
of God, and that not only are you, and so again, in case people don't know the word, anthropomorphization is kind of a thinking process that attributes human characteristics, emotions, motivations, or behaviors to non-human entities. So anything could be animals or cars or whatever. But in this case, the creator, if you will,
Yeah.
that like you don't follow these rules. But I'm actually not going to do anything to you. I'm not going to punish you, right? Not me personally. And not that I didn't, not that I couldn't. Maybe I could do a curse or I could roll over there and punch you in the nose or something like this.
I could take over an entire government and enforce my ideas on you by economic coercion.
Sure, right. No, no, not that.
Yes.
God is going to be angry with you. I'm going to put a human emotion on something that created me that is certainly not bound to the ways in which I think or feel, but I'm going to limit the possibilities of what I say is essentially the endless and inconceivable. I'm going to put emotions on that being and then say that that being is going to be angry at you for these two things. Why? Uh, mm, be, oh, because I don't know, but he's definitely going to be angry for sure, you know.
With the incredible coinky dink that all the people I'm pissed off, he's pissed off with too.
Yes, magic how that happens.
Wow, my chair broke.
Yeah.
I got so animated about this. The chair cracked. It's not my fatness. That's funny. I'll have to look and see what happened with that. But anyways, yeah, it's like one of these things, like it's exactly dead on correct, right? You're like, yeah,
Hmm.
okay. So everyone I'm pissed off with, and I've anthropomorphized the force that like is the creative force of the entire universe, and it's gonna be pissed at everybody I don't like. That's a
Hmm.
little suspicious on the surface of it.
Just saying.
Yeah. Okay, just to finish it up, and then we'll get a little bit of Gnosticism. I probably got another 15 minutes or something that we can do. So at least start talking about a little bit of Gnostics, if that makes sense to you, Daniel.
Yeah, or we just do call it right here and leave that for next time.
Okay, okay, sounds
Yeah,
good.
we'll finish. Yeah, yeah,
Well, the
finish this
last of
last
this,
piece.
the
Yeah,
E is like the evangelicalism and the exclusivism. So, the idea was that like you wouldn't have a problem being a follower of like multiple paths or multiple traditions.
right,
That could be okay. Even in like the Taoist world, I got my Taoist empowerment into a thing called the Complete Reality School, where you follow Buddhism, Taoism, and Confucianism, and you take the elements of that like harmonize together, and you can do that, and that no one's up in arms about that, right? So you can really see the contrast when you get out of this world. But within this context, it's like, no, you have to only follow our thing. And it can get more and more narrow, obviously, as we can see, like with our little Jezebel story, it can get super narrow, right?
hmm,
Where we're only talking about like now like my exact thing, but it was like no, you can only follow our path, our way of understanding the divine, our way of following things spiritually. And that's like so ingrained now that you assume that that's how people always felt because it's so ingrained, but it's an invention. It wasn't a thing that existed before this style of doing things, right?
Hmm.
And sometimes I think about people in the traditional world, you must have been just so caught off guard by that, right? By people saying it has to be my way or the highway, otherwise you're fucked.
Hmm.
Like that hardcore of a point, I guess just wasn't part of how people thought. And it's weird to think like how to get out of that as like a 21st century person, because
Mm.
that's so part of how people think. And they imagine this creates a lot of hostility for people who don't want to have anything to do with religion and spirituality because like, keep that away from me. I don't
Yeah,
want to be
exactly.
anywhere near that.
Right. Yeah. Like, how is
It's
that?
alienating.
How is that God? How does
Yeah.
that make any like that make literally you're not you're pushing me away and then you're damning other people. Like it seems far more like witchcraft than it does like religious practice.
Yeah. Like it's, yeah. And you could see how it fits together in this bizarre way of like, if this is how it is, well, then you really are screwed. Our God really hates you. You know, it's your own fault.
Hmm.
And or it becomes a massive rationalization. And this has come up in some episodes we've talked about where this has like been the subject, but it is true. It's like we have to dominate over you for your own good because we're going to help you not get tossed into like the fiery pit of sulfur
Hmm.
by us taking over. And then we'll force you all to follow what we say, but actually what we're doing is good for you.
Yeah, don't worry.
That's a massive rationalization. But I
Yeah.
don't think it's a rationalization, Charlie. I think people believe it. It's just
Yeah.
become indoctrinated in this way of thinking. Unless you really do things as we're saying, you're screwed, everybody's screwed. So we're actually saving the world from you. And we're going to save everybody else from you who's not agreeing with us. Yeah, it's toxic. It is so toxic. And this ended up being the episode ended up being about this, but it's been my craw. And I don't know, maybe as we get to the very end of this, I mean, just so what you think, like, I don't know how to be ecumenical about that. I don't want to be an intolerant person.
No.
But I woke up this morning knowing we were going to do this episode, and I was like, I don't know how to talk about this except in a way of like, I don't think you can have things like this, you know, because they're so toxic and they're so hostile, you know. Eventually, you know, if you have this worldview, it naturally leads to the idea like, I have to take over and I have to declare war on all the other people who don't think this way. And I don't
Mm.
know from a spiritual point of view if you can function in that way. I think that has to go somehow. I don't know how it goes, but I just feel
I
like
don't
it's
know how it goes.
toxic. But I mean, is that a fair thing to say? I don't want to be a dick about things. And obviously, I know family members who follow conservative paths, and they're not bad people. Of course, they're not, right?
No.
They're people with good hearts, you know. But like when you get deeper into how this functions, maybe on the higher levels of the hierarchy and how people think about these things, especially people who want to wield power over others and dominate others because they feel like you have to comply to their vision. It's very jarring to me. You know, it's anathema to me, I guess you would say, if you want to use fancy words. I think it's toxic. I don't know what else to say about it. But again, I don't like to be judgmental either, but I don't know what else to say about this.
So I was thinking about this a little bit earlier. Actually, I think most people don't really seek a lot of power. They want control in their localized environment, but they're not looking to grab power on a large scale. Because yes, there's a lot of people in politics, but not that many people who are running for that, you know,
Mhm.
offices in that way. That's, there. I mean, and yes, there's other ways to get power. I realize, but that's the kind of the most direct way. And so I just don't, it's a weird thing.
Yeah, I don't know what to make out of it either. Like if you look at like the present dilemma, and we haven't done the official definition of Christian nationalism, but there's like a questionnaire. We'll go through it at some point when we do like modern versions of Christianity. We get to the end of this whole thing, you
Hmm.
know. So you can kind of say that there is a thing that's Christian nationalism, and when you go to, you know, the political party that like is so dangerous now, 80% of the people who vote for them are like in this mindset. So they've all crowded into this space. And I don't know how it feels to be, again, when you want to look at this from like a Buddhist point of view, I don't know how this, what this does to people's spirituality when you're indoctrinated into a thing like this that has these elements within it. It also has
Yeah,
elements of kindness and generosity and all that. It's not
sure.
simple. It's complicated, but there is this part of this, and certainly there's people at the top of those hierarchies that are really aggressive and they want to like subjugate other people. Again, not just in Machiavellian ways, but for ideological reasons that I don't think are entirely just rationalizations of power, though they may be. I think it's because you really believe this stuff, right? And I know what
Yeah,
you do about that. It's like, I hate saying that something like that is just toxic, but I guess that's what I think. So,
yeah,
yeah.
I think so. I had a kind of a brain fart earlier. I lost my, but I remember what I was going to say. I don't think a lot of people pine for power. You might
Mhm.
want to be the boss at your work so you don't have to listen to somebody else tell you their bullshit. But like, you know, whatever. If you're someone's boss, someone else is your boss. It's just how it is. But in a larger sense, in let's say a church sense, a congregation sense, something like this, or in a political movement or whatever, most people are not vying to be at the top. Some are, but far less are not. And it's the people at the top can only be there because the other people around them allow them to be there, put them there. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And from because there's so the pyramid, the bottom of the pyramid is way bigger than the top. Okay? Just think
Yeah.
mathematically, right? So, in order for the top to be there, it has to be stacked on top of the bottom. I know this is really obvious, but I'll make my point here in a second. It's the complacency of the people in the congregation. It's the complacency of the beings at the bottom of the pyramid that allow the head of state, the top of the pyramid, the rogue, whatever, the president, the pastor, the whomever, to be able to do what they do. It's because people cosign consciously or unconsciously. Unconsciously because they've been programmed that this person is a trusted person. Therefore, whatever they say, if you don't agree with it, fix yourself, you know? Or that they are now in agreement with what this person says because they're preaching to some part of their conscious or subconscious that they have heard enough of it that they also believe this now too. This sort of like aggressive kind of takeover of other people. But they can only do that because people don't push back. And so even a person who holds a dissonant belief from, well, we're going to keep it inside of a church and keep it out of politics. Even if a person holds a dissonant belief within the church, within the congregation, of that of the preacher or that of the church as an overall, movement in society, that congregation has a harder time moving forward with what the leaders want to do because even a single person is not going to be budged based off sheer will or sheer convincing because somebody talks in front of a pulpit, to everybody and now everybody's on board. But if you hold your center and you're true to what it is that you actually believe without anybody telling you, this is what you are to believe, that is how you create resistance to things that you don't believe in. And I think through these, at least my intention, and I think it is yours as well, or at least a piece of it, it is our intention to bring this up and hope, pray, fingers crossed, or whoever's listening, as we want to invoke, you know, the musical cherubim and seraphim that could take our words and put it to the people who need to hear it. But it's our hope that these conversations stoke the fires not of rebellion in people just to rebel because they feel like they're real Americans want to fight against the power, but it's because what is being said on the outside doesn't vibrate with what actually is going on the inside. And the way in which that you harmonize those two things is by expressing it, is by saying, I don't believe that. Like, I believe in what you're preaching about the Bible, but I don't believe in your interpretation about how you want to go and implement this on society and how you take, not you, but the proverbial, this one particular story. And now you put those Jezebel glasses on, and that's how you view everybody who disagrees with you. No, that don't work for me. That don't feel right. Because guess what? The rest of this book doesn't say that at all, actually. You're just choosing this one piece, and now that's your crusade. But the Crusades didn't work out well. You know what I'm saying? For almost anybody, except for the ruling class. And newsflash, we ain't the ruling class. So, you know, see who's around you, and those are the people who are going to help you to support your own vision for what you want your church, your political party, your whatever to look like. So, to whoever, that's that's how I feel, and that's how I hope that it can help in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, in some way or another, it goes back to a little bit to our episodes we did on cult thinking. You're getting a lot of pressure
Yeah, yeah,
break out of these things. And like
yeah.
again, like I do my little research for the podcast, and there's a guy named David French who's a journalist and a lawyer, who's a military lawyer, I guess a JAG lawyer, and and like I've listened to him talk, and he makes this point every time of how shocked he was when he didn't want to support, dear leader, that people turned on him and they were going to
Hmm.
drive him out, But he had what you're talking about too, the courage to be like, I can't follow this. This violates my conscience, and I'm not going to do that. So he
Yeah,
did what he had talked about with the psychology of this. He dissented, and he continues to dissent, and that's how you make your voice heard. And maybe when you get to spiritual parts of this, as we get to the end of this all, that's making a statement of who you are karmically in the world.
yeah.
Saying, okay, well, I'm going to make the statement that I'm not going to go along with things that I think are spiritually toxic or religiously toxic or don't follow the true teachings of a figure like Jesus the way I understand that. And I'm not going to just bend to the pressure, because people are giving me the cold pricklies and being hostile towards me. I'm not going to do that.
Hmm.
And, then you can respect that person, he's very conservative. I don't agree with him about a ton of things, but I'm like, yeah, I get why you're doing what you're doing, and you have integrity. Then you have spiritual integrity, and I think that does make a karmic statement of like who you are.
I have a quick story. So when I was active duty in the military, I was very much a church going dude. I went to Bible study. I went every week. It just was,
You and I,
part of.
you and I have never talked about this.
Yeah, so it was, I mean, and honestly, it was beneficial. It was beneficial for me. When I was overseas, I was friends with people, very high up people, because we went to church together. And we were having, our service inside of this little chow hall in a air base in Iraq. Maybe there's a dozen of us, and we would do some prayers. We'd sing a little bit. Everybody would do a prayer for somebody they knew who had passed away this week in the missions and whatnot, or people who were hurt, or family members, or whatever the case was. And so but I had been going through so many different things that I enjoyed the camaraderie, so there's positives that come out of this. And then when I came back home and I was living here, I ended up going to some like um, church in Louisiana. And nothing wrong with Southern Baptist. It's a different experience. It's very loud and very overt, and just it's a lot. And so I remember I went to this one church with my ex-wife and one Sunday, and it was just super loud, and people were throwing themselves on the floor at the altar, and like it was just wild. And I'm sitting back here, and I'm just kind of like watching the thing, just watching it happen. And I've been going to church regularly now for a year and a half, 2 years. Um, and I remember the pastor came up to me and he was like, "What's going on with you, son?" And I was like, "Nothing. I'm just hanging out." And he's like, "Well, how come you're not at the altar? Like I forgot what word he used, prostrating or something else like this, giving yourself up to the Lord." He's like, "Is there anything between you and the Lord that you have to share today, here, now?" And I was like, "No, I'm good." No.
That's a very evangelical vibe to it too.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
like
yeah.
I never went back,
Hmm.
and I just felt like very off put by because my first time here, obviously, um, and it was just a very weird thing. But that pressure was
Yeah.
there right away to like do what everybody else is doing because that's what we do here, as opposed to letting like welcoming me in and then allowing me like I always felt far more spiritual satisfaction in these small intimate settings of devotees who wanted to be there and try and find solace in the midst of chaos than I ever did in any organized place with stained glass windows with one clear person at the front, and then the rest were all being shepherded in their beliefs and understanding. That's just, you know,
Yeah,
my
all the
experience.
pressure. And again, just referencing back to the David French stuff again, military person, he talks about the camaraderie,
Mm-hmm.
that feeling of community. That's touching, and that's healing. You can see that definitely serves a psychospiritual purpose, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then he also realized that I think what shocked him, and maybe he felt a little of this, was that that was contingent in a way that he didn't understand.
Yeah,
Once he started to show, uh, again, we did our social psychology stuff. Once he started to show that like we're not all the same, I'm going to deviate a little bit from where we're at. Then he realized how contingent some of that stuff was.
definitely.
It was shocking for him.
Yeah.
Yeah. All
Yep.
right, it's deep. Okay,
Yep.
as far
It
as it goes,
is.
just we didn't get to Gnostics. Sorry, y'all.
We'll get there.
But we set it up with the idea like these are what the Gnostics are sort of in contrast to. We wanted to do it. So this is
Yeah.
really the point of contrast, and Gnosticism will be our real kind of conversation about like mystical Christianity, right?
Yep.
And you can see where there's going to be tension between these groups, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Awesome. Eric,
Thanks,
thank you
Sam.
so
Thanks for
much.
sharing that story. And you never shared that with me before, so it was interesting
Yeah, yeah,
hearing
it's a
things
good
on a
one.
personal level too. Yeah.
Audience, thank you so much for tuning in. Like, comment, subscribe, hit us up, ginandtantra@gmail.com or on the gram at the Gin and Tantra podcast. Thank you everybody for listening. As always, we've been doing this for quite some time now, and we appreciate all of the, love and support. So share our work. It definitely helps out. We don't have ads, so you just have to listen to our babble and try and get something, trying to get the nectar out of what it is that we are saying. So thanks for tuning in. And if you've made it this far, your attention is in the top 3% of all of humanity right now. And that number is only going to be going higher as short form content becomes more and more popular as time goes on. But we are, let's say, fans of the long game, if you know what I'm saying. So from Eric, this is Daniel. We'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.